Erica here, and I am back, as promised, with a giant book haul. This is probably going to have to be broken up into parts, so I'm going to go ahead and say that this is part one. So I tried roughly to sort these into genres, but kind of the way the stacks are working out, I don't know if I'm going to have to like leave off in the middle of one genre and continue on later. I don't know. I bought a lot of books, y'all. I have a lot of cool things to show you. I'm very excited about them. So let's get started. First, let's talk about some science fiction and fantasy. I've already read some of these, the first of them being the Tawny Man trilogy by Robin Hobb. I just talked about this in my last wrap-up, so that's 3 books. The first is Fool's Errand. The second is The Golden Fool. And the last is Fool's Fate. These were phenomenal. I loved them. The covers are gorgeous. I'm collecting the whole series in these cool covers with these cool script on them, and I'm very happy about them. I also pre-ordered and immediately read The Obelisk Gate by N.K. Jemisin, which is a fantasy novel. It's the second book in the Broken Earth series. The first was the 5th season, which just won a shit ton of awards. Yay! One of my favorite books of 2015. This is probably going to be one of my favorite books of 2016. It was incredible. I finally bought myself an edition of His Dark Materials by Philip Pullman. I got this Everyman's Library edition, which I really like. So it's a bind-up of all 3 novels, which are Northern Lights, or The Golden Compass, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. I've only read Northern Lights. I listened to it on audiobook, so I haven't read the other 2 yet. I'm looking forward to them. I might revisit the first book as well in physical form, because I feel like I just didn't enjoy it as much on audiobook as I might have if I had been reading it. So, super excited about these. I'm sure you're all familiar with this series. I recently picked up Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon McGuire. This is a fantasy novella, and the tagline for the blurb is "What happens after Ever After." I don't know that much about it. The blurb actually kind of confuses me, but I've heard absolutely wonderful things. So I'm really excited about it. One of the reviews says, "Girl Interrupted meets Grimm's Fairy Tales," so I can't wait to get into this. At a used bookstore recently, I picked up Lost in a Good Book by Jasper Fforde. This is the sequel to The Air Affair. It's about Thursday Next, who is a literary detective and has to solve kind of kooky literary-related crimes. The first one, of course, has to do a lot with Jane Eyre. I believe that this one is kind of a play on Great Expectations. So I'm excited to see how this goes. The Air Affair was a really quick and fun read. It's not something that I adored, but it was fun, so I'm looking forward to this when I need something kind of light and fast-paced. I picked up Lagoon by Nnedi Okorafor. Nnedi Okorafor, of course, also recently getting a lot of acclaim for her novella Binti, which I read this year and loved. This is a sci-fi novel, and it's about aliens landing outside of Lagos, Nigeria, and that's all I really know and all I really want to know. I've heard really good things, so I'm really looking forward to getting into this. I picked this book up on a complete whim. For those of you who know me, you may know that anytime I visit a new bookstore, I make it a rule that I have to pick up a book I've never heard of off of the staff recommends section, because I think it's fun, and then I always remember that book being linked to that bookstore. So this was one of those. I picked this up in Asheville, North Carolina, recently when I was there, and this is The Good Fairies of New York by Martin Miller, introduced by Neil Gaiman, and it sounds like it's going to be really weird and also hilarious, so I'm going to read you the blurb. The Good Fairies of New York is a story that starts when Morag and Heather, 2 18-inch fairies with swords and green kilts and badly dyed hair, fly through the window of the worst violinist in New York, an overweight and antisocial type named Dinny, and vomit on his carpet. Who they are and how they came to New York, and what this has to do with the lovely Carrie, who lives across the street and who has Crohn's disease and is making a flower alphabet, and what this has to do with the other fairies, of course, of all nationalities of New York, not to mention the poor repressed fairies of Britain, is the subject of this book. It has a war in it, and a most unusual production of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, and Johnny Thunder's New York Dolls guitar solos. What more could anyone desire from a book? So, no idea what I'm getting into here. I saw it was introduced by Neil Gaiman, never heard of it in my life. It sounds like it's going to be a blast, so hopefully that's what it is. I purchased a book of Russian fairy tales this month. This is like a little paperback flippy. It's actually really beautifully illustrated. Of kind of like the most popular Russian fairy tales. After I read Deathless by Catherine M. Valente, because that's based on Russian fairy tales, and I loved it so much. So I purchased this so that I can read the original fairy tales, and I'm sure I'll love them. And I'm sure that this will be a nice, cozy fall time read. So I got that. I bought 2 graphic novels recently. I've read both of them. And I talked about both of them in my most recent wrap-up. The first one is the second volume of Pretty Deadly. This is by Kelly Sue DeConnick and Emma Rios, and it's a really weird story that I can't really talk about now because it's a very confusing narrative, but it's really beautiful and the art's incredible, and I think you should read it. That's all. It's very hard to describe, especially the second volume, so I'm not going to. I also bought a graphic memoir that I also recently read. This is Marbles, Mania, Depression, Michelangelo, and Me by Ellen Forney. And this is about Ellen Forney's being diagnosed with bipolar disorder and having to kind of weigh the benefits of taking medication versus how that might affect her as an artist and how that might affect her creative spirit and her ability to create things. Really wonderful. Highly recommend it. If you're a fan of, let's see, Lucy, it's kind of like Lucy Nisley meets Alison Bechdel. If that makes sense at all. It's really well done. Highly recommend it. I bought a decent amount of poetry recently. I bought a little hardback copy of Emily Dickinson's envelope poems. These were poems that Emily Dickinson wrote on envelopes. And this is a really cool little book because of the way it's laid out. I hope you can see that. So there are photographs of the originals and then kind of diagrams of how they were laid out. So I'm really interested to get into this. It's a really nice little hardback. I bought a bestiary by Lily Wang. This is kind of poetry meets essays, and it was recommended to me because I really enjoyed Maggie Nelson's The Argonauts. I believe that kind of the way they write is a bit similar. This is actually broken down into separate sections, but they're essays, but as you can see, the format in which they're written is quite interesting. I've heard nothing but wonderful things about this. I think it's an absolutely beautiful book, and I'm really excited to read it. I bought Ariel by Sylvia Plath. I have never read this. I should really read this. Like, really. Also, this edition is, like, the prettiest thing ever, and it's hardback, and it's so cute. And I love it. I'm going to save that for a day when I, like, need to be sad. I got a little poetry pamphlet. It's Beneath the Ice, Fish Like Souls Look Alike by Amelia Phillips. I know literally nothing about this. I was really attracted to the title. I like the cover. It's kind of shiny, but I like it anyway. And the poems are really short, so I will read this in like 10 minutes. But I'm really excited about it. Another collection I know absolutely nothing about. I've been doing this with poetry lately. I've just been picking something up and like reading half a poem, and if I'm like, yeah, that's good, then I just buy it. I'm super choosy, obviously. This is called Bright Dead Things, and this is by Ada Limon. So again, I know nothing about these yet because I haven't read them. I read like one of them in the bookstore, and I liked it. And Nikki Finney's on the back, and that means that it's good because I love Nikki Finney. I think lastly for this part, I'm going to do some classics, and then the second part will be some arcs, some short story collections, and kind of like literary fiction and general fiction. So classics and modern classics. There's this really good used bookstore that I like to go to every once in a while, and their editions are like in really pristine condition, but they're half the price. So I bought a couple of things there. I bought Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is, of course, translated from the Spanish by Gregory Rabassa. And this is apparently about a murder that takes place, and basically everyone knows ahead of time that the person's going to be murdered, but nobody tries to stop it. And then 27 years later, a man comes to this town to investigate why the hell nobody stopped the murder from happening. I'm sure it's going to be weird in typical Garcia Marquez fashion, but I'm very excited about it, and it's little. Nothing at all like 100 Years of Solitude. Another book in translation that I bought is The Lover by Marguerite Duras. This was translated from the French by Barbara Bray. The translation copyright is 85. I'm calling this a modern classic just because I've heard so much about it. I actually have no idea when, 84 is when it was originally published in French. Whatever, I've heard a lot about it. It's just going in this part of the book haul, it doesn't matter. And this is a really short little book about an affair between a young French girl and her Chinese lover in Saigon, kind of in the dwindling days of French's colonial power in Saigon. So, should be very interesting. I'm looking forward to it. I've heard really good things, so we'll see how I feel about it. I also got Death Comes for the Archbishop by Willa Cather. I really like Willa Cather. I think I've read 3 of her books previously. Yes, 3. Most of her books were published in the 1920s, and a lot of them feature really amazing female characters, especially for coming out of that era, who kind of defy genres or gender stereotypes. And this one I don't know that much about, but I know that it's kind of one of her most praised and most acclaimed, and I'll find more out about it later, I assume. I got a really cute copy of Around the World in 80 Days by Jules Verne. I read this a few years ago, and it was a really fun kind of adventure story, and I just didn't own a copy, so I got this fun Penguin edition, and I really love it. I got this beautiful, I saw this on the shelf in a bookstore, and I had to have it. This is a really stunning edition of The Velveteen Rabbit, and I'm so obsessed with it. For those of you who don't know, this is a super famous children's book by Marjorie Williams about a rabbit who wants to become real, and it was one of my favorite books growing up, and it's still a book that's very important to me, and so when I saw this edition, I had to have it. It's got really gorgeous end papers, and the illustrations in it are reproduced from the 1922 edition, so I'm super happy about it. And I love it. I was going to give it to my niece, but I think I'm going to keep it. Lastly, for classics, I hit up a kind of vintage and antique and rare used bookstore lately, which is always a bad idea for my wallet. I got a couple of things. Something that's not super old, but that I was really happy to find is Flannery O'Connor's The Habit of Being, which are her collected letters. I'm kind of obsessed with Flannery O'Connor. I think she's a really intriguing figure. I love her short stories. And so I'm really interested to have this. I don't know how soon I'm going to get around to reading this, but I have it. And I like this hardback edition very much. So something that I collect are older modern library editions, which I really love. And you usually don't find them with the dust jacket on. And I found this edition of Nana by Emile Zola. And I had to have it. I don't know what year it's from because there's not a copyright date in it. It's not in the best of shape. But it has this amazing dust jacket on it, okay? And this isn't like a library thing, it's just to protect the dust jacket. And then it's like just the modern library edition. I am guessing, well, I don't know when it's from, but it was $1.25 a copy, if you can see that. So it's not from recently, and it smells kind of old, but it's not super old, but I am very excited about it. I think it might be from like the 40s or 50s, maybe the 50s or 60s. I don't know, it's got this like coupon that you can tear out and mail in. So, on the back of the dust jacket, which is probably, now that I think about, why none of them ever have dust jackets, because everyone tore them off to mail in their coupon. Jeez. I got some cool hardbacks. I got a copy of 12 Stories by Catherine Mansfield. I believe that this is the first Folio Society edition. Yes. It was published in 1978, and it has nice illustrations in it as well. I have actually Never read anything by Catherine Mansfield, but have been meaning to forever. Her work's kind of hard to find in the U.S., like in bookstores. So I always look for it, but could never really find anything that piques my interest by her. So I was very excited to get this older. I like the older Folio Society editions too. I have some of Dickens' works in these editions, and I like them very much. I also got this Hemingway edition in a slipcase, and this is In Our Time, which is one of Hemingway's short story collections. I have read this, and I really enjoyed it. This is just a really stunning edition. I don't know who it's published by. It's a limited edition of In Our Time, privately published by Westvaco Corporation, Christmas 1998. Whatever it is, it's beautiful, and I love it. So we have that on the title page. We have these gorgeous end papers. There's no illustrations, but I like the way that the chapters, the stories are laid out at the beginning of each story. And the slipcase is really nice as well. So I was just really happy to find that. I'm a big Hemingway fan, and I like this edition of his work very much. So that giant stack is all for part 1. I'm sure this is like 9 hours long. Part 2 coming your way soon, in which I will talk about kind of general fiction, literary fiction, some arcs I've received least recently, and some short story collections. If you've read any of these or have any questions about any of them, I know I didn't talk about them in that much detail. A, I'm out of practice, and B, I have so much to talk about. But if you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I will do my best to answer them. Or if you just want to say hi, you can do that too. I'll see you next time. Bye!